Welcome back to the Sioux City Show. My name is Taylor Grote. I'm hosting this thing. In the studio with me today, I have Ike Rayford. He is the production manager at KES in Sioux City. He is also the chapter president of the NAACP in Sioux City. And what was the last one that you told me?
Diversity trainer for Groundswell Diversity.
Perfect. So go ahead, Ike. Tell us about like what your story to get to where you're at right now. Like, how did you get to Sioux City? How did you become the NAACP chapter president and all that?
Absolutely. With wearing so many hats, it's it can be a long, tedious journey here. But nevertheless, I grew up in Dallas, Texas. Born and raised, went to school, decided to look for something different just to get away from what we call the hood. Most people would be surprised, but I grew up in the hood, Bunton, Texas, so a shout out to. But nevertheless, actually went to the University of Texas in Austin, and then things didn't work out for me there, so I journeyed up here to Iowa. Orange City, Iowa. Can't believe it, but hey. Northwestern, that's right.
I like it.
So
I put in a college application to Austin, and I went to the campus visit. I sat there for the campus like introductions,
right.
When they're going around and everybody introduce yourself. And after they did the introductions, I was there with my dad and my uncle, and I was like, all right, let's get out of here. I didn't even finish the whole campus tour. I just had them sign my sheet and I left.
Right. Really?
Yeah.
Right?
I got a few days off school for that one.
Okay,
yeah.
so I was going to say, and you would have been the perfect fit for Austin.
Yeah, that's what they say. I mean, I was born in San Antonio and then spent like a fair amount of time in Texas for the Air Force and all that. So I love Texas, but had to get out of there.
Probably won't like it right now, though.
No. It's blizzards anywhere are just off the table for me at this point.
Exactly.
Next time I move, I'm going somewhere that's never had a blizzard.
And then if you do go where they can handle the blizzard, right?
Yes, exactly. So going from college where you went to Orange City, or you went to Northwestern.
Yep.
Did you go for just for school, or?
Yes, no, actually went to go play football. I was an athlete back in the day, played football and ran track up there. Was, I believe at that time, studying pre-engineering. And they told me that I would actually have to leave after graduating and then go somewhere else to finish out that degree. However, got married and had some kids, and things didn't work out like I wanted them to work out. So moved to Sioux City. Mm-hmm. And that was a really, what do I say? Just a really trying time in my life. And so moved to Sioux City. And I always like to tell this story. So I grew up Baptist, decided to try Reformation, but graduated from Briarcliff. So Catholicism was what it was. So I tried them all, but now I'm Baptist again. But nevertheless, moved to Sioux City and just decided, hey, I grew up being active in the community. My grandmother was the first black female police officer for the city of Dallas. And that was way back in the 70s. And just decided to just get active in the community and stay active. Worked for Channel 4, KTIV News for a number of years. So production, news, all those things were in my blood. Even my high school, we had a communications magnet. Got busy and it's brought me where I am today.
Yeah. It's very interesting that you say that, your grandma was the first black officer in Dallas, because I was just listening to a podcast the other day that blew my mind. It was about the Houston Police Department and how slow like the big Texas cities were to integrate in that respect, like where they had 25% of their population's Hispanic, but they had 0 Hispanic officers on the police force up until the 60s.
Right.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's still part of the problem, though.
Yeah, right. And I know that's with the NAACP, that's what you're doing a lot of work with, especially with after coming from, June of 2020 to now. And I know that you have made big steps. And that's kind of what I want to talk about is
Absolutely.
that I've really admired your work from afar, I guess would be the way to put it. And just kind of, it seems like the approach that you've taken and the NAACP and Sioux City in general has led to very positive results with positivity after positivity rather than a lot of the negative news stories you're seeing coming out of other cities.
Absolutely. Yeah, we pride ourselves on building relationships. And that's what my background is, in building relationships. I've been a trainer for sales and leadership and just building speakers and communicators. And so now I get to put some of that to work myself. And when I became president, actually a couple of years ago, my predecessor, Flora Lee, who had led the organization for roughly 10 to 12 years. And I had been her vice president for a number of years, did most of the PR and whatever, work she wanted me to do. And we've always had issues and things that we've, been fighting. The NAACP, we're the oldest civil rights organization in the country. Now, we can date ours back to 35, I want to say. But nevertheless, 1909 is when it started. And Des Moines actually got their first branch in 1911, I believe. Wow. So some things have been around. But when you think about fighting civil rights, a lot of times people say, well, this year especially, with the marches and those things, what we try to do, we got away from those, because what we had learned a long time ago when MLK and some of those others were marching was that, dogs being, put on you, water hoses being used on you, all those things just wasn't really getting things done like we wanted them done.
Yeah, and I feel like that particular mode of demonstration is just so open to bad actors. It's like your message can be tainted by one person who might be an actual follower of what you're doing, and it might be tainted by somebody who just wants to go in there and make you look bad.
Absolutely. And so that was it. We couldn't control that narrative. So what we did is said, we're going to try to control the legislative box. We're going to, really get people out there to vote and do those things that they need to do to get a voice. Mm-hmm. And so, here in Sioux City, I've always said this, and I continue to say this, we do live in a bubble. We live in a bubble because, we have those relationships. And I was able to sit down with our chief of police, Rex Mueller. A couple weeks ago, I sat down with Ed Monahan over from South Sioux City Police Department. And we we're able to sit down and say, hey, where are we right now? What are we looking at? What do we need to do? Now, of course, we're not a monolith as it relates to the Black community. I don't speak for everybody. However, I have been voted to at least have a voice. And so my hope is that, many in the community, people of color, whether they're Black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, would say, this is what we need. This is what we want. This is what, we're looking for. And then me and my officers and administrative staff from the NAACP will, sit down and try to figure those things out. One of the stories I often tell is that it was so great when you think of the NAACP, it's a national organization. And when you think of the problems that they may have in New York or the problems that they may have in Dallas, may not be the problems that we have in Iowa. And that's not to say that we don't have some similar things. But, when we think about overall, how do we want to attack something? How do we want to look at something? At some point I had to stop and say, wait a minute. That's not really my problem in Sioux City.
Right.
And when I was able to sit down with my counterparts throughout, the country, the region, and say, well, I can call my chief of police right now and say, hey, what's the statistics for this? Or what are we doing about this? And he answers the phone and says, oh, Ike, this is what we're doing. Everybody looked at me with amazement,
right,
and said, "Whoa, what? Yeah, I got his cell number. I can call him right now. And it was the same thing with the sheriff. If there's an issue with the jail, I can call the sheriff and say, hey, this happened. What's going on? And we have a true, candid conversation. Doesn't mean I'm always get my way, and doesn't mean I'm always get what I want. However, they listen, I listen, and then we can, and I can go back and say, well, this is what the situation is. How do we fix it? How do we, what do we need to do to work on this? Or, our hands are tied.
Right. I think that we're kind of dealing, or what you're talking about there is kind of a benefit to living in the state of Iowa plus living in the city of Sioux City, because a lot of people don't realize, especially with, Iowa's reputation nationally, or the perception would be that we're middle American, we're predominantly white, we're, like good old farm boys kind of deal, right?
Exactly.
But people don't realize that Iowa historically has been at the forefront of civil rights, whether it be for women, the LGBT community, or the Black community.
Education.
Yep.
What people don't realize, before Board versus, Brown versus Board, Clark versus Board, and that was in Iowa. That was, Alexander Clark, who went to to the Supreme Court, Iowa Supreme Court, and fought for his daughter to go to school at a school in Muscatine. And guess what? And that was, I want to say 40, it may have been even 60 years before board v. Brown. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Iowa was the first state in the nation to desegregate public school or public colleges.
Yep.
And as for Black people and women.
Absolutely.
And we also, this is a statistic that is I find it to be like the most tragic statistic that sheds a light on Iowa and how, like, I guess historically progressive we've been, is that we had 3 of the first African American college football players.
Yep.
At Drake, Iowa State, and Iowa. Right.
Yes.
Iowa was as early as the 1800s.
Yes.
But Iowa State and Drake, both times that they had the first Black player on their team ever take the field.
Yeah.
Do you know this statistic? It's disgusting, but both times they were killed on the first play of the game by the opposing team. And it's like, it's so disgusting and so tragic to hear, like, especially in 2021, to hear about that happening, right? And to know that that's how far or how early we were into moving in that direction, to the point where an Iowa team can say, yes, this person is on our team, goes to our school, is a member of this team, right? And then to go to, I think it was Oklahoma and Minnesota are the 2 teams that we were playing that, like both times were killed on the first play of the game.
Right.
And that there was no criminal charges brought is so disgusting, but it's, it's a small pat on the back for the state of Iowa and a big tear, I feel like, for America.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That happened.
Yeah. And that's the reality of what, our country has been, dealing with for years. And I think that's the thing that people get mixed up about. It's the systemics. When you think about going back, over 200-300 years, we talk about Abraham Lincoln, who's one of my favorite presidents. But, over the last year, I've really studied Grant. And Grant, man, I love that dude. That dude was on it. He was about it. And so, when you think about the Reconstruction era and, building equality, hey, now slavery is over, so we're going to build this country to be the strongest country ever. And yet people fought it. And people fought it, and they continue to fight it. And the question becomes, why?
Yes. And the rollback on progress, too.
Right.
That following the Civil War, there was a significant amount of Black legislators in the South following the Civil War. And as soon as the Union forces withdrew after, like, the Reconstruction period, then that was when you saw the rise of the KKK. Then you saw laws coming into play that were basically reinstituting slavery under a different name, under apprenticeship.
Absolutely.
And they were also, just creating all these laws in general that just created Jim Crow. Yeah,
exactly. And we see today that we're going in that same direction.
Right.
I mean, I just heard just yesterday that, someone was, talking about, or that legislators, there was over 30 state legislators that are, introducing legislation to roll back voting rights and roll back, to suppress voting. I mean, really?
Yeah.
I mean, in 2021, that's what we're going to do?
Yeah. I mean, just in general, the way that the African American population has been so negatively impacted by the drug laws. We'll go with drug laws.
Absolutely.
And the way that once you become a felon, now you can't vote anymore.
Exactly.
But then we have to ask ourselves, is the point of our prison system rehabilitation, or is it strictly a punitive system? Because if we're going to cling to this narrative that is rehabilitation, then we have to restore voting rights.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And one of the arguments that we made with the NAACP, because we've been on that, that's been one of our platforms for years, is that, how do you tell a person, that, okay, you've done this crime, you've done the time, you've done what we've asked you to do, and yet we don't want to give you back the fundamental right to just have a voice in the society that you live in. Now, here's the funny thing, but you have to pay taxes.
Yes. You have to be a member of our society. You have to contribute, but we're not going to let you
speak
participate.
On it. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and that's why it's so important that more and more people understand what's really going on, and speak truth to the power, speak truth. What's going on in Texas right now. When you think about the storms, you think about this electrical, power grid. Now Texas, I love Texas. Texas is born and raised there. Now, I'm proud. I'm a proud. So you can't be from Texas and not be proud, right? But Texas has wanted its own. We're Texas. We can have our own power grid. We don't need anybody else. Right. And guess what? now they're blaming, renewables.
Yeah, you're right.
Like what? I mean, and the NAACP, we are a nonpartisan organization. So, we don't go right or left because, we believe that we can have friends on both sides of the aisle.
Right.
Matter of fact, speaking of the prison situation or restoration of rights, Governor Kim Reynolds of Iowa, who restored, we loved her position because she said to the legislation, hey, I need you guys to do this. I need you to pass this bill because if you don't do it, I'm going to do it. And you may not like the way we do it. Now, we know that Iowa does have a Republican-led, legislation, but they couldn't get it passed. They got it passed in the House, but couldn't get it passed in the Senate. And so she had to do an executive order, which is what she didn't want to do because, previous to her, I think Tom Vilsack, he had done an executive order, and
they're able to be rolled back.
And
right?
they were exactly, yep. And Branstad rolled it back. So she said, you know what, let's do it so that it's not rolled back. And yet and still, our Iowa Senate just couldn't, figure out a way to do it. But yet they can really push through school vouchers and
yeah,
and all of this stuff that is totally. Don't even get me started on that.
Right. So I guess one of the big wins I've seen is the body cam. So
Absolutely.
How did that come about?
We have been asking for body cams for years, and obviously with George Floyd and what happened, and being able to see, that a police officer, really just did, have been doing what we've known them to do for years. We were able to sit down with the police department here, Sioux City Police Department, Rex, and his team and say, what is it going to take for us to do it? Now, City Council, I think they've always said, hey, what will it take? And the police department has always said, well, it's money, or, we never really had the support. And so this year there was support. I mean, I think it wasn't just my group, this small group, but it was the larger support of the community saying, right. You know what, we're going to get behind the NAACP. We're going to get behind any other group, whether it's Black Lives Matter, and we're going to demand this, and whatever we have to do to make it happen, let's make it happen. And so, the police department, they had already had the research. They had already been doing, some things to find out, how can they have cameras to integrate with the cameras? Because they've always had car cameras in their cars. Mm-hmm. Well, they ended up finding a vendor and doing what they had to do and implementing within, I think, 90 days, maybe 180
That's
days.
what was impressive to me is that it seemed pretty quick on the turnaround.
Absolutely.
For that.
So they were already kind of in place, and they just wanted to make sure things would work out in the way that they needed it to work out. And so we were very happy with that energy that they put behind that. And so again, sitting down and one thing I'll say about the chief of police here, Rex Mueller, is that he's very, very candid and transparent. Rex is a good man. He really wants to see the best. And one thing that I appreciate about him is that, when he and I sat down and had a very deep, long conversation, he was, hey, you know what? I want good police officers. I don't want to have to stress about, who I have on the street. And what they're doing, right. We'd rather get the bad out and just have the good. And that's not to say that, he hasn't had issues in his department. And just like with anywhere else, we know that it's not a perfect, system, a perfect place. But I think we understand some things differently. And I say this to say this. It's tough being a police officer. It's tough. It's really tough because even right now today, police officers, they don't know how to respond to a situation. Obviously we don't want them to respond with guns, blazing. Yeah. But, when they show up at a call, do they show up passive or do they show up aggressive?
Because there is a time and a place for
exactly.
Yeah.
And what's the middle ground? Mm-hmm. Because one 1 second can mean a life,
right?
And that could go either way. But on the same front, when we think about January 6th, what happened at the Capitol, where police officers showed great restraint, exactly. And right. So, I think things were, if they were not so passive, would things have escalated to the point that they escalate? I mean, we don't know. Right. We can always speculate.
Or would it have turned into a massacre on the steps of the Capitol, and we're dealing a whole different thing,
a whole different thing, exactly. Right. So it's a hard place for them to be, but we do know that it's possible to have that restraint. And we do know, and at the end of the day, as a member of the Black community and the NAACP, we want accountability. That's really what it comes down to. We're not saying that a cop may not get out there and shoot somebody, but he needs to be accountable for whatever his actions are. If it's a good thing, and I don't want to say good thing, but if it's justified, no problem. But if it's not, then let's do something about that. And let's not cover it up. Let's not, just push it under the rug.
Yeah. And the policing situation is so large and complex, right?
Yes.
And, I look at it as, and this is coming from a white person I've lived my whole life as a white guy, right? So I've never walked a step in somebody's shoes who is not white. So I don't know what that interaction looks like with the police. But, for example, I shoot a lot of rap music videos. So it just lends me to not being around as many white people. And I can't tell you how different an interaction is with the police that I can see when it's with non-white people versus how it goes with myself. With myself, I'm usually being approached as, hey, what's going on here?
Right.
Will you explain it real quick, right? Whereas, I've seen it on the other side where it gets approached as straight suspicion from the start.
Absolutely.
Where I don't deal with that. And it's important for white people because I've been around white people my whole life where the narrative will be if you're not doing anything wrong, then there's no reason to be in these confrontations with the police. But when every confrontation or when every interaction you've had with the police quickly turns into a confrontation just because of the way you look or the color of your skin, it gets very difficult to say it's the same thing between a white person and a black person talking to the police. And not that it's every time, because I do think in Sioux City we have a special benefit where we don't have, it's not segregated. There's no Mexican part of the city. There's no black part of the city. So, it's very difficult. It's very easy to be scared of people you don't know, people you've never interacted with. Exactly. If you've never talked to a black person in your life and you've only heard scary stories from all the racists around you, then it's very easy to be scared of a black person the first time you have to, especially if you're talking to a group of black people, right? But in Sioux City, where everybody, if you went to anyone, there's no white high school, there's no black high school. So you've had interaction with every different segment of the community, every different segment of humanity. And it takes away a lot of that fear. Absolutely. And I think that's where we see a lot less of the, when I see the George Floyd stuff, when I see Eric Gardner from New York City. I see cops who are scared of the person that they're trying to arrest, right? And when you take away that fear, I feel like it just lends itself to a better outcome 100% of the time. Exactly.
And you know what? And I don't even know if it's fear. I think to a certain extent, I mean, there may be some of that, but I also think that there is this ego, this place of I'm better than you, because and I'm reading this book Stamped from the Beginning, Ibram Kendi, I believe is his name, and he's really given that historical text of I'm talking about from 1600s, to where people were told that blacks were beasts and they had no training and no concept of understanding. So when that stuff comes from that historical place and it's just put on you that they're not worthy of this and that they are a mountain, because you got to remember there was a time when blacks were second class citizens. If you were black, you were nothing. And
it's very recent.
Very recent.
That's what people need to keep in mind, is that if you have a grandma who's 80 years old, remember that she was 30 when the Civil Rights Act was passed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So very scary. 1964. Yeah. When you think about the fact that up until that time, people weren't allowed. I mean, the voting rights was 1965 and civil rights 64. So, if you think about it in terms of, to that point, weren't even allowed to vote, weren't even allowed to, have you. And so, Chuck Colson said, we're all fooled by our own limited perceptions. And it's so true. And Chuck Colson was in Nixon's. He was the only one who got in trouble for Nixon's Watergate scandal. Yeah. But he said, and he said it because guess what? How you perceive something is just based on, your perception or your experience. And I love that. I tell this story. I was driving across the state of Iowa a few years ago, and it was at the height of when things were going on, and And I'm driving and I'm speeding and I'm trying to get across because I'm trying to go to Cedar Rapids for a conference. And as I'm going, I think I'm going to take the back roads because it's, I may not run into any, but, and I mean, Taylor, when I tell you I'm flying, and I hit a hill, and as I'm coming over here, there was a deputy sheriff coming the other way. And I'm just like,
that's how it always works.
Oh man, and so I look and I look in my mirror and I'm like, man, don't hit your lights. And, and I think I was going so fast, he had to hit his lights, So,
he might not have been running the speed on, but he knew something was going on.
Exactly. So, I see his brake lights. So at that point, I just go ahead and I didn't even just try to keep going. I just pulled over because I'm like, I'm not going to even do this. And by the time he got up to me, that's how fast I was going. But by the time he got to me, I'm sitting in my car and I'm looking and, Iowa's cornfields, and he pulls up and I see him get out, and man, a fear came over me, Taylor, like I had never felt before. And I was like, man, I do not want to lose my life in the middle of a cornfield. What are people going to say?
Right.
And so, I grabbed the wheel because, we teach our young black kids and especially boys, when you get pulled over, 10 and 4, 10 and 2 or whatever, turn on the light, put your stuff on the thing. And I didn't even have time to think about grabbing my stuff out of my pocket. I just grabbed the wheel and I'm squeezing the wheel like I'm on ice, man. I'm like, and he comes up, I have the window already down, and he says, man, you was going pretty fast. And I said, yeah, I'm just trying to get across, and he says, well, you got your license and registration. And I said, yeah, my license is in my pocket. Is it okay if I go down there and get it? Uh-huh. And he was like, yeah, you're all right. So I got my license and I said, the registration is in the glove box. Is it okay if I go get it? He's like, yeah, you're all right. Mm-hmm. So I get it and he looks at it and he just gives it back to me. And he says, hey, just slow it down for me. And I was like, all right, thank you. Now he had every right to give me a ticket, had every right. He probably had every right to take me to jail, to be honest with you. But at that moment, he knew, he saw it, he felt that fear in me. Now, I challenge any person who's that non color, I would challenge them to feel that feeling. When you get pulled over, you don't think about losing your life. No. You think about maybe your insurance going up, getting a ticket, driving record, getting whatever, but you don't think about losing your life. And that's a feeling that we as black, especially black men, if we get pulled over, it's automatic, and then the response of it is, what is they going to say? I'm fortunate enough to be the president of the NAACP, so, people gonna say, well, man, the NAACP got killed. Well, but how quickly will someone say, well, what was he doing? Or what,
did he do drugs in college?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Pulling up any past, so that's our reality, and that's what, I want to bring to light is that, it's not always about, let's keep it 100 right now today. Yeah. And that's why it's so important to build these relationships. So when you do, I met with Senator Ernst and Senator Grassley's people right here in Sioux City and to have that conversation and say, okay, I want to be intentional about what we're doing as it relates to race, as it relates to anything, gender. All of it. Let's be intentional. To the point that we're almost being racist. We're almost being, sexist. That we're,
And from a standpoint of not doing it for the sake of appeasement, but for the sake of let's examine everything we have out on the table. Right. At what point are we falling short of a basic human right or basic equality? Yes. And how do we address that how short we're coming right there?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And that's it. How do we do that? And then let's have a desire to make it right. Because here's the thing. By me asking for equality does not take anything away from you. And that's the whole thing is that me asking for equality means that, maybe now we talk about America being strong. Now America is strong because now we're working together and not against each other.
Right. Absolutely the truth. And does it, I guess, as somebody who's obviously well-versed on the history of civil rights and also the president of a chapter of the NAACP, does it weigh heavy on you the way that civil rights movements have been treated in the past or been handled in the past by the government, especially with, like Operation Paperclip from the start, or with, just the way Fred Hampton was murdered laying in bed after doing exactly everything that you take the most, I don't want to say racist, but the most hating person of the civil rights movement who thinks, oh, well, we already have equality and this and that. Right. And what are black people screaming about in front of the police station for? Because they already have equal rights. You know what I mean? Or they bring up statistics and they say white people are going to be killed by police too, and whatever the case may be. But it leaves out the history of an organized effort by the FBI, by the city of Chicago, by the United States government to suppress the civil rights movement and to controversialize their leaders and to murder anybody who rises above the controversializing.
Absolutely. I think and that's why I think we have to speak truth. I think we have to speak truth and truly understand the historical context. People say, man, I don't want you to talk about slavery, but yet you want to talk about, the things that benefit you or something else. And I think that that's a great point, because when you talk about the, Black Panther Party, you think about this. Now, the Black Panther Party said, hey, they found out that we can carry, guns. Mm-hmm. So we're going to protest. We're going to go to the Capitol, and we're going to, try to get our voices heard.
Yep.
And guess what? A gun.
Exactly. And that is the anybody who has a problem with the Black Panthers and their stance on gun cannot have any type of positive look on the Second Amendment, then, because that is exactly what the point is: to protect you from the government, to be able to have your voice heard. That's the entire point of guns in this country. Point.
Yes. But yet, people who support the Second Amendment would totally speak out against the Black Panther Party.
Right.
And you just, think about that hypocrisy. Mm-hmm. At its best. And so, I believe that the civil rights has been pushed by our government. And I think it's important, that, and that's why it's so important to vote. To vote, not just vote, but be an educated voter, so that you truly can get someone in there to speak for you and vote. One of the best books that I've ever read was What's the Matter with Kansas? And if you've never read it, man, take an opportunity to read that, because it really talks about, and again, and I'm a nonpartisan, but it talks about how the Republican Party in Kansas, basically pushed this agenda. And so everybody voted, Republican.
What time period are we looking at?
This was just probably back in the 80s, 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking you're going back to John Brown when they were trying to keep slavery in Kansas.
Recent. And what ended up happening was, and this was, probably, I would say 10 years ago, that they realized that, man, wait a minute, some of these, this legislation has gone against, just the fundamentals of life. And so they had to, you talk about a fight against that. They recalled their governor because they were like, whoa, wait a minute. This is, we've pushed ourselves into a hole, all because of, the policies that we voted for. And it's not to say that some of the Republican policies were wrong, and I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that when you just say, you know what, I'm just going to go a party just because one or two issues is what I stand for, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, that shouldn't just be the main issue that you vote on, because saying that you're pro-life may go against something else. Saying that you're pro-choice may go against something else.
Right.
So you can't say, if you're Second Amendment, constitutionalist, guess what? Being a constitutionalist, I think, is a great thing. But, if you say, well, I'm for, gun control, well, that may go against something else.
Yeah.
I want, I want my guns. Well, that may go against. So you really have to, try to find. And I think that, when you think back to earlier days, I think Washington and Adams had it right when they said, whoever gets the most votes win the presidency, and whoever's second, it didn't matter what party, because there was some balance there when you think
George
about
Washington
it.
said that the two-party system would be the death of America.
Exactly. So guess what?
Look at us now.
Look at us now. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I just think that it's just, it's crazy, but we have to really take a look at those things, and try to understand that the government, and I'm not, against the government, because I know it's easy to be, pro-government, whatever, but
I'm not their biggest fan, so it's all right.
Because I do think that there are some things that, we need, I think Biden just initiated an immigration overhaul or whatever. And so when you think about immigration, think about that. Immigration, what is it? When we talk about immigration, people immediately think about illegal immigration. They don't think about the whole grasp and the whole span of immigration.
I was just talking about this yesterday, that we have a big problem with the short-sightedness of America. They say in Europe, 100 miles is a long distance, and America, 100 years is a long time, right? But we are all so recently immigrant. Like, I always use it to just basically justify my work, working, right? Is like, I always say, all of us are from immigrants, basically, unless you're Native American, right? You're from an immigrant. So why? Because I get really tired of a sense of entitlement, where people are like, I am owed this because I'm an American, right? Because all of our grandpa or great grandpas and great grandmas got on boats or maybe on planes if they're a little bit more recent and said, I'm going to leave behind everything I know, everything that I love, and I'm going to go to an entirely new place to work for the rest of my life to hopefully give my kids a little bit better life.
Exactly.
And we all lose. And then the idea that people think, I just have a problem with even the label of immigrant, where people are like, oh, those are immigrants. It's like, no. All of us. None of us are from here. So why is it? It just grosses me out that we can't go.
Absolutely.
Oh, so we have the most recent influxes of immigrants in America or in Sioux City are the Mexican, Asian, and African communities, right? Whereas to label that as any different than somebody who's lived here for a generation is just strange to me.
Absolutely. I had a young man who said, I host every once in a while. Just conversations. Let's have a real conversation. And we keep the media away just so that we can have a real conversation where a person can ask me a real question and I give them a real answer. And a guy said to me, he said, my issue is that, I worked for IBP for a number of years and then they let those people come over here and I was like, okay. So, he says, I just don't understand why they would come and work for, $10 less than, what we were working. And, and I said, well, tell me this. I mean, why do you blame them?
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, so did they decide what they were going to be paid? Or did the person who hired you decide what was going to be paid? Mm-hmm. And he was like, well, but they accepted it. I'm like, but did they know any different?
Yeah.
And
what was the slave or what was the wages that they were coming from?
Exactly. Right. And that's the key is that if they're working for $5 over there and they're coming over, just like you said, I want to make a better life for my family and give my children just a little bit more than what I had, then why would anyone be upset with that?
Right.
Now, granted, I know people are against unions and but maybe if you would have said to this person, hey, there's a union because this is what we're doing, then maybe, but don't be upset of a person who just wants a better life, who's willing to come and work hard.
Because that's the most American thing that you can talk about.
Exactly.
That is the fundamental concept of America is the ability to work for a better life.
That's it. Right. And that's all anyone, if you go and ask anyone who has come from somewhere else, why did you come to America? I just want, I just want a better life. Mm-hmm. I don't want, the government telling me that they're going to kill me or,
right.
I want to have some freedoms. I want to be able to speak, and again, vote. I can vote for this person and not feel like it's going to, haunt me, and really understand that life is, when I was in school, we had a kid who came over from, I think, somewhere in Europe, and we took him to the demolition derby, and he was so upset. And he said, man, you guys in America, you wreck cars that we would use these cars to go to work, to go to school, to go to, and I mean, like, wow. Never thought about it like that,
Right.
I mean, because it's not a car that anybody would use, but would they? I mean, because we dismiss the inner city, we dismiss urban, because we put people, whether it's a reservation one day or if it's the urban, of the projects the next, we put people in these places and then we forget about them and say, oh, they'll just be okay. But in reality, no, it's not. It's really not.
And people who have like a anti-immigrant sentiment, unless you're British or maybe Dutch, name one thing that you can criticize a recent immigrant group about that they didn't say about your Irish great grandpa, that they didn't say about your German great grandpa. Look at the way that Benjamin Franklin talked about the Germans and the Germans and the Irish is no different than the way that Steve King talks about Mexicans.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important that we don't allow it to happen.
Right.
Because if we know, and there's a saying that if, when they came after this, when they came after them, when they came after them, no one spoke up. And so now they're coming after me. And you talk about government, guess what? If the government comes after there and here and here and we don't, then it's just the elite at that point doing what they want to do, how they want to do it, and not have a problem. Rick Perry, who, and I keep bringing up this Texas thing because I have family in Texas.
Yeah.
And so, my mom is still down there, my brother, my cousins and uncles, and so guess what? Man, I'm worried. I'm concerned because, not only do they have heat, they don't have power now. They all live in different places and they're, fairly successful people. But Rick Perry, who obviously was the previous governor and past energy secretary, he's sitting somewhere in his nice, saying, well, this is not a problem. Don't let the federal government come in and tell you what to do. Well, hello, it's a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't have food, water.
People love saying that about government. When the government failed, they're like, no, don't expect the government to solve your problems. It's like, hey, you caused the problem, brother.
You caused it, exactly.
Like where last year, like people are like, oh, the government's giving out all this money for coronavirus. Like, I can't run my business because of the government. So can I get some money? Exactly. I don't feel the least bit ashamed taking a little bit of money off of all of the contracts that I lost because I couldn't run a business.
Right, exactly. And so, and that is that piece that you have to, and again, not to beat up on them, but because they still run, society as we know it. But you have to take a real look. And I am so sick and tired of people blaming the media, though. I come from the media, and so I just wish people would, understand the differences, understand that there's a difference between broadcast media and cable and
local
talk
media versus what KMEG's doing versus what Fox News versus what MSNBC is doing.
Exactly.
Right. I worked at, KMEG.
Right.
And I'll say that there was no hey, don't run that story because it makes Democrats look bad, or we need to run this pro-Republican life section.
Exactly.
There was none of that.
None of that. And so that's the biggest thing that we have to really, take a look at, because people do. The other day someone sent me a thing about, Biden, he, all the executive orders that he signed, he signed an order for insulin to go up. And I'm like, prove that. Mm-hmm. And so I did my research and the order that he signed had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that the order that was signed was expiring.
And that's the problem, is that with partisan media in general, as far as at the national level, I say that MSNBC and Fox News have if the Taliban could have done 1/10 of what Fox News and MSNBC has done to the American public, then the Taliban would have been the most successful terrorist organization of all time.
You're so right. Yeah, I love it. And but I really do appreciate when people can sit down and have a conversation and talk about, I try never to get too political, but obviously in my role, politics is because at the end of the day, policy changes are what we need and what we're looking for. And, we as regular citizens can't make those changes, so we have to look to the politicians. But I do think term limits should be in effect, because I think it doesn't give people time to get their feet in. And we do have to be careful who we, when you look at a Steve King, and I realize, and the interesting thing is that, and I've often said this, Steve King isn't when you meet him face to face. I've met him. I mean,
he's a nice guy. He's
nicest
charismatic.
Guy, exactly. Yeah. One of the nicest guys. I mean, and we've had conversations. We've talked and those things. But in that inner self, and when if this is what you believe, then you should not be elected to one, and I'm not saying the highest office, but elected to a higher office that you represent a group of people, especially when you don't support, or have love for those people.
Yeah. I had a big problem with it when, with a lot of Steve King stuff, I'm kind of like, he was just playing to get some support. You know, like I get it, whatever. But it's the gross side of politics. It's the problem with not having campaign finance reform, campaign term limits, or term limits in general, because it just turns into, it's just a money game. It's just a campaigning game.
Absolutely.
Right? But with Steve King, when he started talking about the fact that the Sioux City billboards are in Spanish now, and that's what's happening to their town. That's why we need to stop immigration. It's like, no, I live here, dog. It's not. I don't have a problem with billboards being in Spanish, because it means that on every street corner is one of the best burritos you've ever had in your life.
Exactly.
And and at some point, the German bakeries in the town are going to be replaced by a panaderia, and it's not because it's not a negative. It's just the evolution of what it means to be in America and have a melting pot.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think, and that's again where it comes back to when that question of why. You know, what is it as a white individual? What is it that you are afraid of that's happening or going to happen that makes you stand firm, dig your feet in the, and say, nope, I don't want this. You know, what is it? What is it that, and I've asked this question, what is it that you want? White America, what do you want? Because I would like to know, so we can say, okay, now I know what you want, so let's figure out how we get it. Unless, it's so far-fetched that, because at the end of the day, I believe we all want the same thing. I want a safe community. I want a safe, productive, efficient, effective school for my children. I want to, make a decent wage, so that I can take care of my family, so we can take a vacation, so we can do some of those things, and it's not just I'm working 60 and 70 hours a week to make ends meet,
Right.
I mean, I want to know that I live in a place that the meat is good, that I don't have to worry about getting spoiled meat or that, I have heat right. in my home. So I would challenge any person that's of non-color to tell me that they don't want those things. If someone wants, hey, I want a gun too. If it means I'm gonna stay safe, but I mean, I hope I never have to use it.
Right. I think that Killer Mike articulates that point the best.
Absolutely.
Yes, the way he talks about just gun rights and their importance in the Black community, I'm like, this guy really, I feel like he gets it.
Exactly. Absolutely. So I would challenge anybody to, sit across from me and tell me that you don't want these things. You tell me what you want and I'll tell you what I want. And I guarantee you, we're going to be right lock and step.
Yeah. And I mean, regardless, and you can take away, it doesn't have to be black, white, it could be Democrat, Republican. Yes. It can be, atheist, Catholic, right? Everybody, I feel like, does want the same things. They want a level of autonomy and freedom.
Right.
They want to be sure that their family is safe, and they want to be able to make a living.
Exactly.
And that's at the core.
And so when you think about those three things that you just said, and then you throw in the fact that, we're fighting over, masks. That we're fighting over healthcare.
Some things are so silly.
I mean, it's silly because at the end of the day, if you get sick, you need a doctor. If I get sick, I need a doctor. But yet and still, we're going to fight over healthcare. We fight over pro-life and pro-choice. I mean, as if, and now it's, me and you are a bunch of men, how do we tell a woman what she should or shouldn't do, with her body when it comes to reproduction? And again, not to say that we would ever tell a woman, hey, go do this. No, but that's her decision, and to should we not want crazy people to have guns? I mean, I'm not necessarily for gun control in terms of, taking away from everybody, but I mean, if I know someone who has a mental illness, I think I'm okay with them not being, issued a license to have a gun.
Yep. And it's all just like the problem is that it's all just splitting hairs, right? It's
and that's
where the division comes in. Right. Is the hair splitting part.
Right.
Crazy,
exactly. And so as Americans, I think we have to take a deeper look and truly understand what it means to have freedoms, have rights. Because we can be some of the biggest hypocrites ourselves in terms of we support our troops, but we don't support freedom of speech. Right. We support our troops, but we don't support freedom of choice. We support our troops, but we don't because our troops are fighting for our freedoms.
Right,
is what we tell ourselves, and then yet we have one group or one side says nope, this is the way it needs to be. You said something earlier, and it made me think about the Supreme Court. Oh, you was talking about campaign finance reform. And think about it, part of the politicians or the partisan groups, they are trying to put people on the Supreme Court that sides with them.
They're like literally just lobbyists.
Exactly. And it's like, whoa, no, I want a better America. I want a fairer America, a safer America. Just in case if there's an argument to something, what does this mean?
Yeah.
How do we interpret this? Not,
Here, I'll put out a PSA right now. Until we have campaign finance reform in America and the super PAC system, there will be no such thing as free and fair elections, because nobody will be elected at the will of the people. They will only be elected by who puts the most money in their pockets.
Absolutely.
That is a fact.
That's a fact.
And if anybody has any problem with campaign finance reform, as far as politicians go, that means they're corrupt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so grossed out by the campaign finance thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? And you're absolutely right. I couldn't disagree more.
Yeah. And then like not only that, but when you get a system like where you get an incumbent in, where people say, "Oh, Mitch McConnell needs to get out of the office." Well, Mitch McConnell's been doing a lot of companies bidding for a lot of years, and that's not a Republican thing. That's Democrats and Republicans both do companies biddings.
Yes.
Mitch McConnell's not going to be out of office because nobody's going to be able to raise any money to challenge him, because the people who already he has their vested interests in mind. They're already paying his bills.
They're paying his bills.
There's not going to be an incumbent to challenge, or there's not going to be he's not going to be beating the primary.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know what? And if people don't believe you, all they have to do is just go back a few years to healthcare. When Obama was elected and you know what? Right here in Iowa, if you go back and you look at United Healthcare and you look at Senator Grassley and his wife, who United Healthcare big supporters of them. So, do you think that Senator Grassley would ever vote against someone who's lining his pockets?
Yeah.
No, never. Hey, I need you to do this. Okay, I'm gonna do it. Yeah. I get it. I get it. So if you aren't morally in a place to say, you know what, I'm gonna make the right decision, then you know what, someone has to do it. Somewhere else.
And that's the thing, is that nobody's going to be morally in the correct place to make that decision, because we've seen time and time again that people aren't making the moral decision.
Exactly.
And it's not even necessarily the moral decision, because I just to be clear, I'm like a right-leaning voter.
Right.
And I'm totally against the current healthcare system and privatized healthcare, because at this current stage in the whole government regulation system, we are making two different industries filthy rich.
Yes.
Go drive by a hospital in every city. The nicest buildings in the entire city are government buildings, don't get me started, but then hospitals and insurance buildings.
Yes.
Why are we making two industries so filthy rich off of a necessity?
Of a necessity.
So if you're a right-leaning voter like I am, and you believe in small government, less government spending, then maybe we should look at how do we get less money coming out of our pockets into a healthcare system. And if that is, maybe we just all share in a collective healthcare system to lower the cost for everybody, then maybe we do that,
Absolutely. Yeah. How do you get people to listen to that, though?
Yeah. Well, Fox News tells them that their healthcare system will triple their monthly payment, but it
exactly.
Won't, so,
yeah. And that's the thing. That's the fight that we're up against. And even in the work that I do, that's the fight that I'm up against. Because even, to something to the point of, the school voucher system right here in Iowa, that the legislation has pushed, for school vouchers to be used at private schools and stuff like that. Now, on one hand, you think, oh, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But on the other hand, when you think about the oversight and who's going to make sure that it's not abused, what about those kids that don't have the transportation to get to the private school or those things? And so you think about, discrimination at its best,
All right, I'm sorry to jump in here for just a second, but from this point on, the audio kind of started cutting in and out on the board. So you're going to be hearing a mix of the board and the on-camera audio. It's definitely worth listening to. I hope you hold in there, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. Thanks.
Because we know that private schools, when they look at, hey, I can get this athlete,
They'll make exceptions. Suddenly their mom's a secretary at the school.
Exactly, And what about the kids who have, what do they call them, EAPs, who have, well, we don't want them. We want them. And so I think that you really have to look at that. On the flip side, I'm a proponent of making sure that schools are failing our kids, we need to take a look at that. We need to really ask those questions and get into those schools and say, hey, what's going on? Why are our kids not using the latest in technology or the latest books? So I think that there's questions that can be asked that we have to,
Why have we accepted the narrative that poor children are more poorly behaved than wealthy children? Why have we accepted that narrative and just let that dictate all of our conversations around public schools? Well, this public school is shitty because it's a very poor part of town. It's like, wait a second, I'm poor. I know a lot of poor people, and I don't think their kids are markedly worse than the rich people's kids.
Exactly.
Does it maybe come down to before and after school programs? Does it come down to the nutrition in the school? Does it come down to there's no access to technology at home, so they need additional access to technology at school? Like, how do we reframe the conversation that is in a point of like solution based rather than preconceived notion based?
Absolutely, and that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
I'm at what is the solution? How do we fix this? How do we and I'm okay with inching. One of the biggest things that we've talked about with the city as well as the police department, we've talked about having an oversight committee. Now the police department is like, I don't know, we don't, and I understand where they're coming from, because how do we tell a cop to do this job when we don't know the job? When
they've never stepped a foot in your shoes and you've never walked in their shoes.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So I totally get it. On the flip side of it though, there has to be, people who are in this has to understand that someone's going to look over your shoulder, because, we want to make sure that what you say is what it is and what you do is what it is. And so, I think that, but what you were saying, it goes so far deeper when we talk about systemic racism. That's where it goes. It goes so deep to those things that you say, wow, man, if I try to fix this, minimum wage, it's a big topic right now. Should it be $15? I don't know if it should be 15, but it shouldn't be $7.25.
Yeah, well, regardless if we're looking at minimum wage or not, is like, I think that the best statistic is to look at is like how many people are getting minimum wage, right? Hold that right there. But then to go, is wage stagnation the problem? Is ballooning corporate salaries the problem? Because when you look at minimum wage, like for me, for example, here is if minimum wage went to $15 an hour, then it's a very tough pill to swallow here.
Absolutely.
And I don't make that much more than anybody who works for me.
Right.
And if they, it would put me in a situation where I might have to start looking at getting rid of an employee here.
Right,
so there is like all types of different problems, but like at the same time, I would never pay an employee minimum wage here. Right. I'm way more than minimum wage. But if we start setting a baseline of $15 an hour, so it's like, how do we get employers to understand that, what this job isn't a $9 an hour job anymore? What you were talking about here, and theoretically, the free market would decide that.
Absolutely.
But we've seen, as we look at statistics right now with average wages and wage stagnation, that the free market isn't working well enough.
Exactly. Right? Well, and the thing of it is that, like you said, and I love how you break that down, and I think just to go a step further, if you think about breakfast, how many people can, if you're making minimum wage $7.25, you're not eating breakfast.
No.
And that's not even for a family. Because cereal costs $4, milk costs $4.
Yeah. When I was growing up, when I was in high school, a burrito at Lagunitas cost $3.50.
Right.
Burrito's $6.
Exactly.
And the minimum wage hasn't risen since.
Right.
That. So before I could get 2 burritos with my minimum wage salary.
Right.
And now I can hardly afford one. I have to work an hour to eat a burrito. Right?
Yeah, work an hour to eat a burrito.
And
you don't even get a drink.
Yeah. It's exactly that. Yeah. Uh-oh. Well, regardless, we got it over here, but it just stopped just a minute ago. So if you're here, if I just cut out, it's because the recording board did stop on me, but we're good. So I looked at it just a minute ago. So.
It didn't like that heat that's coming from us, right?
Coming way too hot on that. Yeah. So, regardless, though, I think that we have covered a ton here, and
Absolutely.
we're about an hour in. So is there anything that you wanted to come and talk about today that we didn't get to yet?
No, you know what? I appreciate, the opportunity to be here. I appreciate, having a real conversation. Appreciate, when you can have a conversation and people know what they're talking about, and it's not just, the feelings, but it's some facts, with it. Because so often, I'm dealing with people with their feelings and they're steeped in it. Whether it's, again, people talking about the media, whether it's people talking about just what they feel, and I get it all. I get, when people talk about the insurrection, when people talk about Trump, when people talk about, so I get all of it, but on the same token, I have to go back with morality. You can't legislate morality, and there's just some things that I just think that, it's hard to say that people, I don't know. I really appreciate being able to have that conversation, and I'm always open to have more conversations. And sometimes, it's the wide things that, that we start out with, but then it's those specific, things that really talk about us. Because even here right now in Sioux City, there are some things that we're dealing with. We have a couple of people who were murdered. We're trying to figure out, and they were of the black persuasion, and so there's and there's an issue there, but because one, you have the police department who is really trying to solve this crime, and then you have the black community who is hey, snitches get stitches type of mentality, and so people don't want to talk because people don't trust, and so what we're trying to convey to people is, hey, if this was your family, when do you erase that line that you've drawn in the sand of, well, we don't talk to people, we don't help, we don't, participate in those things, because we have a family who is desperately looking for, closure, to what's going on. And so, and I know personally that the police department is working hard, but they run into walls, because people are like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't have nothing to do with that. And I don't know if it's from a fear thing or if it's just from that place of trust, that historical place that, we don't trust police officers because, they've never done anything good by us. Mm-hmm. And when you look at that history, it's like, okay, you want me to snitch, but you don't want to snitch on your own people when they do stuff. And so that's that, mentality that we're dealing with, that I'm dealing with. And every day I get a call about something, whether it's someone who's been in jail, arrested. Just recently I had a call from a school system, not even just in Sioux City, but in one of the small towns in Northwest Iowa, that's got some racial things going on. We had some things, 2021.
Yeah. We're coming into 2021 hot. So,
we're coming in hot. Yeah. So it's, the fight continues, and we would rather it be an isolated incident than a whole, than it just be the norm. And so, yeah, it's crazy out there.
Well, I'm just extremely, delighted by like all of the work that you have done, and I think that's it's probably uncomfortable for you to like hear that and have to respond to it, but I really do think that you've done a great job, and just watching from afar, seeing all the things you're getting done has been super impressive to me. So I'm very thankful that you took the time to come on, and the one last piece that I have for you is, what do you think is the most slept on thing in Sioux City? And when I say that, it's like something that you love about Sioux City, whether it's a specific place, a restaurant, something to do that you don't think enough people know about and just even realize is a possibility.
Wow. That's one of those questions you're like, whoa, you know what? I'm going to say that Queen of Peace.
Really are Catholic.
Man, I know, right? And I say that because even in my most trying times, when you just got to get out of the house and just want to go somewhere, I've found that place to be one of the most serene, calm places that you can go to. And if you're just a Christian and don't adhere to the whole, Mary thing, they got a thing of Jesus on one side, they got Mary on the other, they got the, but just to walk the grounds, man, it's just a very calming place. And I would just encourage people, when you're angry, when you're upset, and you just need to get away from it all. That's that place that I think, it's slept on. I mean, because it's so easy to go to a bar. So easy to go, want to have a drink, and I don't know if that'll make it worse, if it'll make it better. But I think, you definitely, go grab you, a cup of coffee. That's for your homeboy, the Stone Brew right now.
Yep, right.
Go
grab some Stone Brew.
Go grab you a cup of coffee, and then go up there and just chill. I mean, they got benches up there where you can just. I mean, seriously, it's calm and you see some deer running, you just get away. I mean, if you're mad at your wife, you're mad at your husband, whatever, I mean, the kids getting on your nerves, you just want to get away if you can't take them to but that would probably be the thing for me. But I love Sioux City. I do. My family just recently was like, man, because I was complaining about, it being -4 degrees, and feeling like -35, and now they having that weather. But they was like, why do you still live here? And I'm just like, because I'm getting older, and I'm like, man, my bones are, feeling this.
It's different now.
But I do. I love Sioux City. I love the food. I love the fact that it's like one day I want Vietnamese and go have me some pho, and the next day I can go have me a nice authentic burrito. It's not. We don't just get a burrito or a taco. We got the real.
Straight out Michoacan.
I mean, totally. And so I love that. I wish we had a truer. Nothing against Famous Days, but I wish we did have a truer barbecue, a real barbecue place. It'd be nice if we had a soul food place. That we could get some real authentic.
Didn't we
used to?
Here on West 7.
They just didn't have the support that they need. That
barbecue
they needed.
Doesn't last in Sioux City.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Yeah. It's because it's not something that people are going to eat every day. But I guess with having that corporate background, Famous Days has done pretty good. And it's not terrible stuff, but I really love the amenities at the city. Whether it be the arts center, the museum, some of those things that have put into place. And I realize that Downtown Partners is really working hard on trying to build their presence and stuff like that. And so, Sioux City is a great place. And we have a city council that really, they love diversity and they're true about trying to make sure that people get what they need.
Yeah, and I mean, just to piggyback on that, I get a call once a week from Alex Waters on City Council, and that is how much he gives a shit about what goes on around here. Exactly. That he's willing to call some guy who owns this business and see what my thoughts are on things that he's got going on. So,
and that's real.
Yeah,
that's real. I mean, Rhonda Capron, who's a past City Council, she was the same way. But again, we can call Bob Scott, Dan Moore, Alex. We can call those people, and say, hey, what's going on with this or that, and they're going to have a true, candid conversation with you. So, absolutely, I love Sioux City.
Me too. Me too. All right. Well, until next time. This board has completely fallen apart on me. But until next time, thank you so much for tuning in. Check out everything that Ike is doing. Check out what the NAACP in Sioux City is doing, and have a good one. Thank you. This board. Oh, it's just. I don't know what's going on with it.
I understand.
But I got backup recording, so we're good.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
No, I thank you, man. That was